What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here. A few days ago, there were several YouTubers who, together, they put up a series of videos titled One Excellent Scene. They each dissected a scene that they really liked from an X-Men movie, and the person who kind of masterminded all this, I think he did, Nando vs. Movies, he put out an open call for anyone else, if they wanted to put up their own One Excellent Scene. And he said you didn't even have to limit yourself to X-Men movies. If you wanted to, you could talk about video games or cartoons or comic books. And I figured I have kind of exhausted everything that I wanted to say about the X-Men movies, so what could I say about the X-Men comic books that I thought might be interesting? And then I thought about a storyline that ran in some of the 1991 Marvel Comics annuals that I really enjoyed, and I wanted to talk about it with you guys. The annuals in question were New Mutants Annual 7, New Warriors Annual 1, X-Factor Annual 6, and Uncanny X-Men Annual 15. The backup story in these, called The Killing Stroke, featured the government superhero team Freedom Force. This used to be Mystique's Brotherhood of Mutants, introduced around the time of the Days of Future Past storyline, and then in the mid-80s they eventually started working for the U.S. government, working for Valerie Cooper, and then this was what was left of that team going on their final mission. And I really enjoy this story a lot. It's kind of focuses on Avalanche a little bit, who was a character we didn't really know a whole lot about before this story. He was introduced, like I said, during the Days of Future Past storyline, or maybe just a little bit before that, and we never really had a story that focused on him. For that matter, we never really had a story that focused on Freedom Force as a team. Most of the time, they were antagonists in the X-Men or X-Factor book, but we never got to see them on their own, in their own protagonistic right, if that's a word. But this was the first time where we got to see them front and center in a very DC Comics Suicide Squad kind of story. In particular, Freedom Force is sent into the Middle East to rescue a scientist that the United States wants to use for their own purposes. And Freedom Force encounters an Arabian team called Desert Sword. They want to save the scientist for their own governments to use. And at one point, Blob and Pyro, they are surrounded by members of Desert Sword, and Desert Sword says, "Okay, what are you guys going to do?" And Pyro just burns the guy alive. They were sent to rescue him, but he figures, well, if our government can't have him, then these guys can't have him, and at least our government will be happy that the other guys didn't get a chance to use him. And that very thing kind of happened in an issue of Suicide Squad at one point. Deadshot, he was supposed to be protecting this politician, and then eventually he just shoots the politician because really he was just supposed to keep this guy from getting killed by someone else. I wanted to talk about the character of Avalanche, who is kind of spotlighted in this story, and up until now we really didn't know a whole lot about him. Like I said, Freedom Force hadn't really gotten a whole lot of spotlight. Mostly they were just there to kind of scuffle with the X-Men every now and then. But Avalanche, he had been with Mystique's Brotherhood going all the way back to the Days of Future Past storyline, and we didn't know a whole lot about him. But in this storyline, Freedom Force is sent to rescue this scientist, and almost immediately, things are much more dangerous than they thought they would be. Super Saber, who is this World War II veteran with super speed, he gets his head chopped off. And then Crimson Commando, who is also a World War II veteran, he gets his arm blown off, and part of his face is missing. It looks really rough. And then the team gets split up, and then Avalanche actually has a chance to cut his losses and make it to the rendezvous point, and then he doesn't have to worry about any of this. But then he sees that Crimson Commando is still alive. Avalanche. Commando? You're still alive! Help me. Don't leave me. He has a chance to abandon him, and then he saves him, and I absolutely love that. I love a bad guy with a heart of gold. Sometimes a bad guy, you just want them to be unrepentantly evil. That can be really enjoying to watch, but I absolutely love bad guys who have just a little bit of humanity, and every now and then they will do the not bad thing. And since we hadn't really seen a whole lot about Avalanche up until this point, it was really interesting to get to see him do something a little bit more humane. Even though all of these guys are supervillains. They have no reason to look out for each other and watch each other's back. At this point, it would have been easier for Avalanche to run by himself without carrying the dead weight of Crimson Commando. Even though all of that, you should keep that in mind, he still stays and he saves Crimson Commando, carries him to the helicopter. And you're thinking, okay, this might be a little bit of a redemption arc for Avalanche. Up until this point, at one point when Desert Sword had encountered Freedom Force, there's one guy, his name was Razor. He has a sword that has something to do with the standing of your soul in the afterlife. And he slices Avalanche with his sword and nothing happens. And then later, Freedom Force escapes and one of Razor's teammates says, why didn't your sword have any effect on Avalanche? And he says, well, either his armor deflected the sword or he already thinks that he's going to hell, in which case the sword has no effect on him. And then we see Avalanche stays and saves Crimson Commando when he could have just run. And you're thinking, okay, he's not that bad of a guy. He's looking out for his buddies. He's going to make it to the helicopter, and then they're going to go back and they're going to save Blob and Pyro, who's been separated from them. And then everything's going to end up okay. And then these two, they make it to the helicopter, and then they contact Blob and Pyro, and then the guy flying the helicopter says, we're going to have to leave you guys there for a little bit. Crimson Commando's in pretty bad shape. And then he looks to Avalanche and says, what should we do? And then there's a pause, and Avalanche says, leave them. They're not worth it. I absolutely love this. This is hinting at a kind of redemption arc for Avalanche, and then, nope, just kidding. He's still just as bad as what you would have thought for someone who's part of a mutant supervillain terrorist team. And I just think that's really interesting. This story is not only a really neat look into the character of Avalanche, but also kind of important for the future of Marvel Comics. This desolation of Freedom Force kind of leads to the formation of X-Factor as a government superhero team. Up until this point, X-Factor was the original 5 X-Men, and not too long after this, Chris Claremont would leave the X-Men books that he had been on for 16 years, and then the original 5 X-Men, they rejoin the other X-Men and become X-Men once again. And then we get some other characters like Guido, Strong Guy, Jamie Madrox, Havoc, Polaris, Wolfsbane. They become the new government mutant superhero team after the falling apart of Freedom Force. And then we see Blob and Pyro, who are arrested by the authorities here in the Middle East. Eventually, they join Toad's new Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. So this does have some ramifications in the coming issues, specifically with the formation of X-Factor, but I don't even look at it as this is an important milestone for X-Factor that would last for a good 10 years of X-Factor as mutant superheroes. I don't really look at it as that. I look at it as just a really interesting story featuring Avalanche. This is probably the most that we've ever gotten to look into his character. I don't know if we ever had anything quite this interesting with his character following this. So I really love this story. It's collected in those annuals, like I said. It's not even the big story in those annuals. The biggest story in those annuals features Proteus and the New Warriors, New Mutants, and X-Men and X-Factor all teaming up to fight Proteus. But that's the big story. But in my opinion, the better story is this story featuring Freedom Force. So that is the one excellent scene that I wanted to talk about. What do you guys think? Do you like this scene? Have you read this story? If you want to do your own one excellent scene, I'm going to echo what Nando vs. Movies said. Do your own scene, throw it up there, let other people see it. And that's all that I have today. In the meantime, you guys have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.